Today we will be looking at the specimen of the testis. As we all know, the testis hangs from a cord-like structure known as the spermatic cord. This is the spermatic cord through which the testis hangs downwards. The testis is present in a scrotal bag. If we remove the coverings from here, we can see the testis present over here. This is the testis. So first of all, let's look at the testis and then we will come towards the coverings. The testis consists of an upper pole and a lower pole. The upper pole, how do we identify which one is the upper pole? The upper pole gives attachment to the head of the epididymis. Whereas in the lower pole, we have the tail of the epididymis. So by this point, we can identify which one is the head. So the head, the upper pole, we will have the head of the epididymis. We have two borders. We have an anterior border, which is convex and smooth in nature, and we have a posterior border, which is present on the posterior part. It is flat and it is broad. We have two surfaces. We have the medial surface and we have the lateral surface. Now, how do we identify the medial and the lateral surface? For that, we have to look at the posterior border. Now, the posterior border on the lateral side gives attachment to the epididymis. If you can see over here, this is the epididymis. So, the posterior border on the lateral side gives attachment to the epididymis. This is the medial surface, which is convex, smooth, and this is the lateral surface, which is also convex and smooth. Now on the lateral surface, you can see that we have a space present over here. This space is basically known as the sinus of the epididymis. This space is known as the sinus of the epididymis. We always have to remember that the sinus of the epididymis is present on the lateral surface. On the upper pole, you can see that we have a presence of a very small structure. This is known as the appendix of the testis. And this appendix of the testis is the remnant of the paramesonephric duct. So, keeping all these points in mind, the upper pole gives attachment to the head of the epididymis. The lower pole gives attachment to the tail of the epididymis. The anterior border is convex and smooth. The posterior border behind is flat. On the lateral side, we have the epididymis. The medial surface is smooth and the lateral surface is also smooth and convex and has a presence of the sinus of the epididymis. So, keeping all these points in mind, this testis belongs to the left side. So how do we hold it in anatomical position? We simply hold it in this way to show that the testis hangs from this cord known as the spermatic cord. We know that the left testis hangs a little bit downwards as compared to the right because of the long length of the left spermatic cord. Now, let's look at the coverings of the testis. The coverings of the testis, we basically have two different kinds of coverings. We have the extrinsic covering and the intrinsic covering. So let's first look at the intrinsic covering. So here, the first covering that we have, this is the visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis, which is covering the anterior, the medial and the lateral surfaces of the testis. This tunica vaginalis is deficient on the posterior part. We do not have the tunica vaginalis on the posterior surface or the posterior border. So after removing the visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis, the second layers that we can see over here, this layer is known as the tunica albuginea. This tunica albuginea covers the entire testis, and around the posterior border, this tunica vaginalis goes inside the testis and divides the testis, which is known as the mediastinum testis. The tunica albuginea goes inside and is going to divide the internal of the testis into lobes. And the innermost layer is known as the tunica vasculosa, which is going to line the innermost layer of a single lobe. So these are the three intrinsic coverings. We have the tunica vaginalis, the visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis. we have the tunica albuginea, and then innermost we are going to have the tunica vasculosa. These are the intrinsic layer. What are the extrinsic coverings of the testis? The coverings are same as that of the scrotum. That is, from outside inwards we are going to have the skin, then we will have the dartos muscle, we are going to have the external spermatic fascia, the cremasteric fascia, the internal spermatic fascia, and the parietal layer of the tunica vaginalis. Now let me show this same structure in a cadaver where we have dissected a part hanging from the spermatic cord. Now here what we have done is we have dissected the layers of the scrotum and then have tried to show you the spermatic cord. See, this is the superficial inguinal ring. From the superficial inguinal ring, the spermatic cord descends downwards and the testis hangs with the spermatic cord. Now this spermatic cord, here what we have done is we have taken out the whole structure. You can see over here. Now here what we have done is we have also removed the outermost layer. This is the tunica vaginalis, the tunica albuginea. Now here what we have done is we have separated I have dissected the testis into two parts. Now the inner section of the testis, here you can see the presence of small thread-like structures. If you can see over here the small thread-like structures, these are known as the seminiferous tubules. So what this albuginea, the tunica albuginea does is this goes backwards and first it covers the whole of the testis and then it goes inwards and divides the whole testis into small lobules. Within the lobules we have approximately like 2 to 3 seminiferous tubules. So these are the coiled seminiferous tubules. These seminiferous tubules, the coiled seminiferous tubules are present anteriorly and the straight one are going to be present posteriorly, and all the seminiferous tubules will combine together in the mediastinal part of the testis to form the rete testis. On the posterior part, if you see over here, you can see the presence of bluish color. Now this bluish color is basically known as the Pampiniform plexus of veins. This Pampiniform plexus of veins, as we all know, the testis is present out of the body because the testis requires a lower temperature for spermatogenesis. Now what this Pampiniform plexus are doing is, this Pampiniform plexus are helping in the counter current mechanism where the heat coming from the arteries are exchanged over here and the temperature is maintained 2 to 3 degrees lower than the temperature of the body. So the bluish color that you can see over here, these are the Pampiniform plexus of veins. So this is all about the testis. Thank you so much.